What is up, everybody? Mark on the mic here, joined by my good friend, Mr. Ryan Muckenhirn. If you're listening to it when this podcast drops, it is early August, which is the early season. I mean, we've got some above timberline mule deer hunts. You've got, potential alpine Sitka blacktail hunts in southeast Alaska or Kodiak. There's some velvet antler, early archery elk hunts. Heck, I've even heard of early rifle hunts, guys killing bulls with the rifle. I mean, there are situations where you might be hunting and you have the opportunity to take a velvet deer or elk or other antlered critter, caribou. A lot of caribou hunts. Man, that's the early season. A lot of guys killing velvet bulls when they go out. And you got to be, if you want to preserve that velvet, Ryan, you have to be able to care for it in the field, or at least in short order when you get back to civilization.
I have a lot of questions.
I hopefully have some answers. Now, I've only shot 2 velvet bucks in my lifetime. Both were Sitka blacktails, like the one that we have on the table here. One got eaten by a bear. And
I remember that hunt.
And I don't have...
Man, you were upset about that.
Anything. I've got some great pictures.
You went through so many measures to prevent that from happening that it's almost hilarious to learn that it happened.
That area where we ended up, and I don't know exactly for what reason. I mean, there's a lot of black bears in the area, but it was infested. I've never seen so many bears.
To go so far as this, when Mark got back from this hunt, he was pretty bummed. You hung him over a cliff.
Yeah, as much as we could, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'd say it was more of like a cliff/rock face sort of deal. There weren't any trees.
This is not, to inspire this is not something they could have climbed down to get to. In fact, they hand-over-handed your cordage.
I think they pulled it up.
To get to the bags of meat. And you were left with a bag.
Not even. They got it all. Like, I couldn't even find a game. We looked for like 3 hours, like scouring the hillside.
Unbelievable.
Didn't find anything.
You were bummed, man.
Yeah, got some great photos, some incredible memories. It was a great hunt with a really good buddy of mine. Definitely high adventure. One of the coolest hunts I've ever been on. One of the tougher hunts I've ever been on.
Now,
which is generally where you get your memories.
Could you have killed a black bear on that hunt?
No. Yeah, it was it wasn't open yet.
Understood.
Yeah. But luckily, we have an example before us.
And an incredible blacktail at that.
Very, very fortunate to have taken this deer. Now, when you shoot a velvet buck, number one, here's what I'll say. They're kind of a pain.
Sure. A
velvet buck or bull. The velvet is fragile. You have to be very careful with it. There's some best practices. What I might do is kind of talk through what I did with this deer, and then we can work back on, I guess, how I kind of think is like I said, the focus group of one here, example of one, but I've been doing some reading, some research. Like I said, I can talk through what I did, talking with some other folks and things like that.
Can we talk about velvet first?
Sure.
So this is a really interesting, so this species, like deer in general, right? On an annual basis, if you don't know this, they drop their horns. So, come end of their season, and this is to include moose, caribou, reindeer, elk, roebuck, fallow, whitetail, blacktail, mule deer.
Sitka blacktail.
Like all these cervids do this, which is really interesting. And before they have the horn or antler that most of us are very familiar with, the development process, it looks like fur, right? So if you're not familiar with what velvet is, it's fur and skin over a very rapidly growing tissue that eventually ossifies and turns to true bone, which is wild. And so before us, this example here Mark has, when you look at it, like it's very evidently fur, right? And there are
very fuzzy.
Yeah, there are what appear to be guard hairs that run more or less all the way up through the structure of the antler. And it like has the same color pattern as the rest of the deer.
Yeah, underneath the velvet.
Yeah.
Blood flow.
Yep.
Like it is, like you said, like very living.
Yes.
situation underneath there.
It's so far removed from antler. And it's not, the first time I'd ever touched a velvet buck was a vehicle road strike. Happened to be me driving the vehicle. Shocking. And this would have been probably like a late June, early July situation. And so I had to move his unfortunate carcass off the roadway. And the horn was like soft, like soft. And it felt like I was holding onto an appendage more so than an antler.
Okay.
And it was not as furry as this.
Was it springy?
Yeah.
At all?
Yeah. It was very odd to touch. And it was, you look at this one, it's definitely furry. Right? It looks like, rabbit fur, basically. This was like peach fuzz on a dark skin. It was very strange. And it was very fascinating. I don't hunt deer in a time of season in which I even have an opportunity for a velvet deer under normal circumstances. If you were to find like a stag buck, perhaps you could do that, but it's pretty few and far between.
Yeah, stag buck, that they'll hold their velvet throughout.
To the end.
Yeah.
This is wild, but very, very neat critter you have here, Mark.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, when I shot him, so prior to the hunt, I was hunting with our good friend, Mr. Eric Barber. And prior to the hunt, we knew that there was potential to shoot a velvet buck.
I was going to ask that next.
We're kind of like on the cusp. And actually, what we found when we got there, we shot a mixture of hardhorn bucks and velvet bucks, right? Yeah. So a little bit of both going on there. Prior to the hunt, Eric was like researching like preserving velvet. He was he was like really like getting up on that. And I was like, whatever, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. You know what? I don't really care that much. If I shoot a velvet buck, I'll deal with it, at that point. Then I shot this buck and I was like, oh man, now I actually really care about preserving this velvet.
So did you bring with you, like proactively, the means to preserve it?
So I did not, but Eric did. Now, if you're watching on, and incidentally, we killed 2 bucks pretty much at the same time. Like, he killed a buck, and then I shot this one right after in short order. His was a hardhorn buck, and then I shot this one that was a velvet buck. So,
anywhere a guy could go to see that?
Yeah, you can go to the Vortex Nation YouTube. I'm glad you brought this up, Ryan. The Vortex Nation YouTube channel and check it out. It's Alders to Alpine, Kodiak blacktail bonanza. I think it's something like that.
Yeah.
Really fun hunt. Man, it's come up in conversation on like 5 or 6 different podcasts lately. So people are like, yeah, I get it. Like I either watched it or I'm not gonna watch it because you keep telling me to.
It's really good. You showed that to me in a hotel when we were at a trade show. The final cut.
Oh sure,
yeah, it was very exciting.
So we got the deer broke down.
Yep.
Packed it out in an absolute just like gale force wind, rainstorm. Got to camp. I don't know. I think it was like midnight or 1 a.m. when we finally got to camp. Got up the next morning. Ended up taking, horns and heads to the beach. The next day we got there sometime in the afternoon. It got. I would say it was. Sunny but cool. Like it wasn't like it was actually just like a comfortable temperature. Sure. I think I was even in a t-shirt, but it wasn't just like blazing hot at the same time. And so when we got to the beach, I knew Eric had some of this velvet lock. So I absolutely hosed this rack down. Pilot picked up the meat and horns, and then did a meat run. Well, when he got back, it's what he should have done. Like but he put everything in a freezer, right? Like as that would be like what you would normally do. This velvet lock stuff actually doesn't work. It needs like UV and sunlight, and I think even like a little bit of warmth to work. So what happened for me?
Yeah, it says right here, Mark. Do not put in a freezer, refrigerator, cooler, or shade.
Right. So we kind of did the opposite, but I still, at least for a few hours, got that stuff on there, got it it was in a freezer. We packed it up in fish boxes, used Alaska Air cargo to get it back to Milwaukee. That's where I ended up picking up all the meat and horns for everybody, got it back to my house. And then I immediately shoved it back in my own freezer at home, where I think I had left it there for like a month or so, something like that. Eventually, I took this to a taxidermist, and, so then I bought, knowing that it had been frozen. This is like the full story that people probably, they may or may not care about. Don't tell me if you don't. I'm like, so then I buy this bottle over there on the internet, get shipped to my house, because I'm thinking, well, I'm going to have to, hose this thing down again with the velvet lock. But then I also got to thinking, I've still got, essentially like a raw deer head in here, right? We haven't boiled the skull, we haven't beetled the skull. Also, when you boil a skull or beetle a skull and you have velvet on, there's high potential of compromising the velvet,
especially with beetles.
Right.
Well, and I suppose especially with both, but like a beetle's going to look at that and be like, food.
And I talked to a couple different taxidermists, asking guys that were doing it the same way. One guy was a boil guy, one guy was a beetle guy. And I'm like, hey, can you do this? And both of them were like, I wouldn't suggest it. Right. So for a Euro mount, like what I did, what I ended up doing, I did bring it to a taxidermist. Yep. He cut the antlers off with like a notch, freeze-dried the antlers. So then he sent the antlers that were now individual to a freeze dryer. I think he actually boiled the skull and then pegged them and put them back on. But because he, knows what he's doing and he V-notched it, everything went back in the right spot. So if you look through, you can, somewhere in there, you can see those pegs.
So that was the thing that I just learned today. And so like this taxidermist too is a pretty cool guy. Friend of ours here at Vortex and does phenomenal work.
Real nice work, yeah.
And you can't tell unless you look into the Foreman Magnum, the hole in the back of the head. You can see those little pegs in there.
And you think of so many like deer or elk mounts. I mean, they're shoulder mounts. They're coming that way. Now, the other thing I'll say though is it costs more to do that than your general hard-horn Euro mount, right? So then it kind of begs the question, if you're thinking about this on the front end, if I'm going to pay this much and it's a nice buck or bull or whatever, do I want to just do the full thing and do a shoulder mount?
So here's a question I have for you about velvet in general. So you kill this deer. Now, I've not touched these horns, nor am I going to. When you had killed him, was he hard underneath there?
So I think he was very close to being a hard-horned buck. And I guess indicators of the other two of the other deer that were with him were hard-horned. We shot other hard-horned bucks even the day before.
But presumably, like, you touched his rack.
Yeah, it was pretty durable because, I mean, I touched it, and I'll get into that a little bit too, like probably holding it for some pictures, things like that. Even just like, putting it in my pack and strapping it to my pack and things like that. And, I kind of had my top lid going over the top of the base of the skull here. So there was some contact with things throughout. It was a fairly long pack out. And the velvet actually, when we got back, I was kind of surprised. I was like, I kind of thought I would have, compromised it in some way, but it didn't.
Because what I have in my head is like, if you've ever seen a deer rub its velvet off, or like we always see pictures, especially dramatic pictures of caribou hunters, where they killed a bull and he's either sloughed or they've stripped. Mm-hmm. And like the thing that I have that is inspired in my head is like, you have to touch this so gently because it'll just peel off like it's saran wrap over the top of it.
I think it is pretty fragile.
Okay.
And I think it gets even a little bit more fragile
posthumously
the closer it gets to, I think I would assume it's extremely fragile when it's really full of blood early on. And then as you get close to where it's going to naturally be stripping that off, it's kind of ready to go. So I kind of did a combination on this thing. It worked. I used the velvet lock. I also, had it in my freezer for like a month. That's almost kind of like freeze drying it, probably to a degree. You can keep a velvet buck in the freezer a pretty long time before you have to deal with it if you want. Granted, that you have the room. This is this fit nice in my freezer. You shoot some big 200 velvet buck or a bull elk or something like that. That's a different situation that you have on your hands, and that is a situation where probably V-notching it and having it freeze dried would be a way to go, or notching it and doing the velvet lock. So, and also, like, I don't want this to come off as like brought to you by Velvet Lock. It's just something that I learned about, and it seems like it works, and it's very convenient. And the reading that I've done on it seems like it's a convenient solution. You'll hear, and I've heard over the years, guys are like, oh yeah, you get formaldehyde and inject it. Personally, like, I guess I'm talking about how people have been doing it different ways for many years. I'm going to speak to how I would do it. I'm not going to carry formaldehyde and needles, even in my vehicle or into the backcountry. It's just not something that I care to do.
When you say V-notch, did he at the pedicle or did he cut the skull cap?
So I think he cut him. Here.
Okay, it's up there a little bit. All right.
And then did some.
Yeah,
work
I'm looking for a seam and it's just simply not present. That's very interesting. Very interesting.
And the V-notch is just so you kind of have that
index.
It's like putting a puzzle piece together. Yeah, an index. So like I said, I kind of did a combo thing. I also kind of lost my train of thought there, Ryan. But yeah, I mean, it seemed to work out well. Now, here's the other thing that I would say. You definitely want to be careful when handling your velvet antlers in the field. Like, even touching them can compromise it. So if you are taking photos, maybe you hold from the underside of the chin, or just in ways where you're not going to be gripping the antlers, transferring oils from your skin, compressing that blood in further, things like that. That's going to limit the effectiveness of a product like that. It's they're tricky. Like I said, they're kind of a pain to deal with.
But I'm really glad you did it, because I think this is the closest I've ever been to a velvet rack.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and you just don't see them that often, right? So if your season has typically an archery provision, so like I'm talking lower 48, right? I did one hunt for mule deer, and there was a potential for velvet, and I had scouted that unit maybe 3 weeks ahead of that hunt when we were out there, and all I saw was velvet deer. By the time we were out there, all we saw was hard-horned deer. Mm-hmm. And so, whatever.
Never it happens quick.
Yeah, never ended up with one anyways, and that wasn't necessarily the objective. But there's kind of like a rare thing, and I'm sure some people in some places, like, they get the opportunity to see this. Like, you've killed 2, and it was like a super specific spot, but it's really neat. I mean, there's like a dermis or a skin underneath the hair. You can just see it a little bit, but like just seeing he's got like these longer hairs that are on here that would otherwise match the coat, and they run up the entire length of the antler. It's just a really interesting form to see the animal in, and
the entire process really is fascinating. Yeah. I can't even believe that they do it. And
now you have it. So I'm glad you did it. I'm pain in the butt aside, but super cool. Super cool.
Talking with a taxidermist, again, going back to the care of these things, knock the animal down, take some pictures. If you are going to cape it for a shoulder mount, I think a lot of these things, they still apply. But he was saying, prior to being able to get it to your a freezer, to a taxidermist, to maybe you didn't pack, maybe you didn't care to put this in your backpack and tote the weight around with a bottle of Velvet Lock. Treat them as you would meat, which makes sense. You got blood and stuff underneath, things like that. So, don't handle them a lot. Handle them with care when you have to, and keep them cool, keep them dry, and out of the sun, right? So that's prior. Like we talked before, once you hose these things down, or if that's the route you choose to go, then the sun becomes your friend. What I like about that is if you are on a backcountry hunt and you're going to be in the field for a length of time, maybe you're on a caribou hunt and you're waiting for a plane to pick you up.
That could be days away.
It could be days away, You could get an unexpected a few extra days depending on weather if you get a late pickup. That's a tricky one. If you're going in on a cub or something like that, weight is an absolute premium. It's like, do I pack a bottle of this or do I pack an extra day of food? You're going to be making decisions like that. If you have the ability to be less weight conscious, I would definitely bring something like that as at least an insurance policy to help preserve the antler if you're in that situation.
Yeah. So if you would have decided to strip him, what you would have been left with was a hard horn. It would have been the same. He's done in his growth and development phase. Like he's potentially hours to days, maybe a week from rub and velvet anyways, because you already had deer that were hard horned on that same hunt. So you would have ended up with a similar representative of that, but just sans velvet. Okay.
Yeah.
I'd really like.
And then you're like, okay, well then, do I stain the antlers after the hard horn antlers after they strip? Do I take it to a taxidermist and essentially have them flock it with a synthetic velvet?
So they'll do that too, huh?
So that's an option too.
Okay.
And some guys are really good at it. I've seen ones that you're like, that looks like a synthetic velvet, and I've seen ones that you're like, I probably wouldn't know the difference actually. So
yeah, it's really interesting, and it's difficult to see here, but you can see they have like colics, like where like the various like the geometry changes on the antler, and looking down like at the pedicles, there's like a very complex. I mean, I imagine it would be almost impossible to emulate in flocking.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get maybe the exact detail, but it does come out pretty close. And I'm the type of person that I want to preserve the memory as it happened.
Yeah.
And if your velvet got compromised by whatever, the pack out or whatever that's a route a person can go. But this is an interesting, that Velvelock is an interesting product. And I would, if a person was like, I wouldn't not encourage a person to kind of go both the route that I did too, like almost as like that extra insurance policy. Like I think this stuff works from what I've read about it. If you use it properly.
Obviously, it works. We're looking at this.
Sure.
Yeah.
But like I said, I did a combination of using that and freezer and freeze drying. So it's like, but yeah, you with that stuff, you essentially, like I'm picturing, okay, I shoot a deer on a hunt, and maybe it's maybe I'm even in camp, or maybe I am packing the meat out first and the head last. Maybe there's a situation, or even just hours. We are talking about something that can get rotten, right?
Yeah.
So, get the horns off, and then you just spray it on. You don't use the. They've got directions all over the website, so if you're interested, you can probably take the directions. The quick and dirty is you spray starting at the tips, pretty close. You're not like spritzing it. I mean, you're kind of trying to get down
hosing it, yeah,
through that membrane. Start at the tops, work your way down, cover 360. And then go all the way to the pedicle. Some of that stuff will probably run towards the pedicle gravity. You want the antlers sitting up, right, like this, kind of like they are here on the table or similar. And and then you can essentially put it out in the sun. Like I said, you can go to the website, you can see all the directions, but that's the nice thing about it. To me, at that point, you've stopped the clock from ticking, and that could be even like, I've got my meat to a cooler, right? Maybe my cooler has some ice in it. Well, I don't want these to be getting wet or anything like that. So you could even keep them outside of that. And you've kind of given yourself some extra time there. Then at that point, you can take it to a taxidermist, and they can do what they want to do. Maybe they have a preferred method. Maybe they want to, notch them, take them to the freeze dryer anyway, just as an extra, whatever. But I think at the minimum, I think this can do the job all on its own, and I think it can certainly buy you some time.
I think this is super cool.
Any other questions that you thought about?
I mean, like a million, but I also don't want to. Can you handle the rack now? Like, After you'd picked it up, he's like, yeah, you can touch it.
Yeah, I mean, I've picked it up. Like, again, like I'm being extra cautious.
Sure.
So I've just been kind of picking it up by the base. One thing that he did say is, be careful a little bit to like just, grab it by one horn and like, move it around just because they are pegged in there. So you don't want to.
Are they removable now, or does he have them epoxy?
No, they're fixed. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, just like you wouldn't handle your regular skin mounts because you're going to transfer oil that can degrade.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to do the same. You're not picking this thing up. It's like when we bring in Euros here, we show each other our deadheads. You hand somebody a Euro, you grab by the rack. Don't do that because this is like fur that's on there. So just like a skin mount, like try not to transfer a whole bunch of people juice to the skin mount because it can degrade it just the same.
For sure. And I'm sure there's guys out there that have shot velvet deer or elk, and I've seen some ways in which people are like, yeah, I still boiled the skull.
Yep,
and
I've seen that too.
Preserved the velvet.
Yep.
I just didn't want to risk it.
No, I hear you, man.
So, I think it can be done. If it was one that I really, 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 really cared about, I'd probably go the more conservative route, though.
Yeah. Interesting. Capital buck, man.
Yeah, super fortunate. I'm trying to go through my notes here, Ryan. Fill some airtime. I just want to make sure I don't, kind of miss anything.
I just want to beg the question. Like, I presume you're going to hunt Southeast Alaska blacktails again.
Hopefully. I'd love to.
Were you granted an opportunity at a buck of this caliber in velvet again, would you take the same steps?
Yeah.
Would you? Okay. You do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if there was a hardhorn buck and this buck and they were basically the same and standing next to each other, I'm going to shoot the hardhorn buck.
Okay. All right.
Because like I said, they look cool. They're awesome. Kind of rare. Like you said, there's not too many hunts where you get an opportunity to velvet buck, but I like hardhorn bucks. And you can use the handles. You know what I mean? These things come with handles. And then you get a velvet buck and you can't use the handles.
Yeah.
So.
That's funny.
I'm trying to think. I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, the instructions on the website. I think the key takeaways for me are, instead of the heat being your enemy, now you can turn the heat into your friend. You are on maybe a backcountry or which I know I hate carrying weight in the backcountry, or some sort of drop, wilderness, fly-in type hunt. It's just going to buy you some time. Obviously, the amount that you need goes up, the bigger the critter.
Yeah,
right?
I'm reading on the back of the bottle here. This is pretty interesting. May I?
Please.
All right. There's a usage chart for coverage of velvet lock. Amount of product needed will vary by size of antlers. If applied per instructions, 12 ounces will do approximately 180 inches of linear antler. So an example of this, deer, if you had a 180-inch deer.
Which I don't.
Close, though, right? 12 ounces of velvet lock. An elk, caribou, or moose is probably going to require 48 ounces of velvet lock, that's interesting.
I think that might be the big jug.
Yeah. So that's something to consider.
It is something to consider.
Definitely.
And then you do think of a fly-in type hunt.
Yep. 48 ounces.
Potentially per person, right? If you're going with like a group of 4 or something like that.
You were doing a little backcountry meal prepping yesterday, and you had weighed your a day's worth of ration.
Yeah.
And what would we come out to?
2 pounds, 0.6 ounces.
Right. So put that into context. It's a day of food, day and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. Build a lighter rifle.
I did that too.
Hey.
But yeah, just some stuff to think about, some stuff that I hadn't necessarily thought about prior to going. Like I said, I was like, whatever, I'll figure it out. And then I'm like, hey, Eric, can I borrow that?
Sure. And Rick shot a hardhorn deer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Yep, this is super neat. I'm just enamored by like the coloration. So he's got like this little tiny palmated web thing up here, and there's like a white patch in there. And then like at different parts, it's very obviously like colored fur and just a very interesting pattern.
I'll say one more thing about the old velvet lock. It says it generally cures the antlers in about 72 hours.
Sure.
Right. So and there's some best practices there. Let's see. We have seen the best results. I'm reading this off their website. We have seen the best results when the product is used in temperatures exceeding 75 degrees Fahrenheit or 23.8 degrees Celsius. Who uses that? While it goes against everything we know about Velvet, once Velvet Lock is applied, it preserves and dries quicker in warmer, drier climates and direct sunlight. Please note, Velvet Lock will still work when applied and used in colder temperatures. I'm thinking of like a caribou hunt where it could be hot, cold, and freezing all in the same day. That happens in the mountains as well. Mountains of the West.
That's interesting.
But you will see increased dry time and efficacy. So like I said, it's interesting that the hot weather, sunlight goes from being your enemy to your friend once you apply it. So and also something to think about too. I don't know. That's what I got there. I think a great way to go, if you're able to get your animal out quickly, I would just probably take it to if I could get it to a taxidermist I trust in short order. You've done this a million times.
Yep.
You know what to do. However, whatever method you like to do, it's been working, do that, right? But this is, a tool that you can have in your toolkit and, use on your own as well.
Well, I sure am glad you had that tool, Mark, because this is neat.
I am.
You have an outstanding collection that I've been privileged to see, and this is a nice piece in it.
Oh, for sure. Well, and you know me, Ryan. I can't make a decision anyway, so of course, I essentially did both, freeze drying and the application.
I'm glad you did it. That's cool.
Cool. Well, anybody out there? What do you think? Have you shot a velvet buck?
I want to
before?
see some pictures of velvety bucks.
Let's see some pictures of velvet bucks. Did what you do to preserve it work? What did you do to preserve it? Did you have any issues? And let us know. Like I said, this wasn't intended to be like a full on. I feel like it's coming off as a full on ad for this product.
But it worked.
But in the end, it worked. And I just think it's like something.
I didn't know this existed.
To me, it's like the easy button that you can take with you.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I didn't know this existed.
Yeah,
I thought it was the formaldehyde, or you killed that thing and it now doesn't have circulatory function. Like, you have a finite amount of time to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's what I got.
Neat.
And hunting season is basically here.
It's velvety buck season right now. I see several on my way home every night.
I know.
I've started taking a new route because I've been watching one. Depending on what time I leave, he's usually there. I've
been going to our gun builder's place, Ryan, a couple times lately. One time to drop off, and one time
it's good velvety
to
buck
pick up.
Yeah.
And but when I've been going there after work, so I'm driving home at prime time in prime deer country.
Yeah.
Like, great to see some deer, but a little bit nerve-wracking. You don't want to hit one of those things. And I know you, unfortunately, are all too familiar.
Since I put on the deer whistles, I don't have that problem anymore. Haven't hit one since.
I think that might be a 10-minute podcast.
Deer whistles, do they work?
Do they work?
Well, I got a guy.
All right. Velvet bucks, deer whistles, do they work? Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.
See.